All right. Welcome, everybody. This is the first Data Science Speaker Series presentation of this academic year. And thank you all for coming. Thank you for braving the rain. I hope you didn't get too wet as you came in here. And thank you, everyone in Zoom, for joining as well. So we are absolutely delighted to have with us a return presenter, our friend for Montgomery College, Mr. Bobby Williams. And I'm so excited that we have you here today. And actually, I don't think I'm going to do any more introductions because you need no introductions. You're just going to do what you do best. So thank you very much, Bobby.
Thank you, Dr. Sadie. That is very kind. Thank you all, especially people who came in person, but also people taking time to join us on Zoom. I will say, Dr. Sadie, that I think you're doing a phenomenal job with this program. I'm really excited to see it, and I'm sure the students share that sentiment. I am a data scientist with a concentration in digital forensics investigations. That sounds a lot fancier than I actually am. I'm not that fancy of a person. We're gonna talk about eDiscovery today. I'm gonna refer to my notes from time to time because there are some things I wanna make sure you walk away from this discussion with. I want you to also remember that it is a discussion. So if you have questions, ask them. You can raise your hand in the chat if you have questions. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and see if I see something. And Dr. Sadie will be keeping an eye on the chat as well. But yes, I encourage questions. You can wait to the end. You can ask during. There's a lot of material to cover. We may not cover it all, and that's fine. It's way more important to me that I address anything that you're thinking about now than I try to impose on you all the things that I think it's important for you to know. Okay? So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So, first question, I'm going to ask you a few during the presentation. Does anybody know what this is?
It's a phone.
It is a telephone. Yes, it is a telephone. It's a phone. It's what we call a rotary phone. So when I was very young, take some guesses at what my age is, but when I was very, very young, this is how we used the telephone. The way it worked is you would put your finger in one of those holes and you would spin it around and you would wait for it to come back. And then you would choose the next number and put your finger in and spin it around and wait for it to come back. And that's how you initiated a phone call. We also had this crazy thing called long distance where they would charge you extra money to talk to somebody who didn't live in your local area, right? So that's how communication kind of started for my generation. Now, I walk around with one of the most powerful computers ever created in my pocket. And this thing has expanded my data footprint. I mean, who knows how much? I mean, I got social media accounts that I connect to from here, email accounts that I connect to, a series of messaging apps, native and third party. All of the data on this phone has different formats in the back end. And in my job, digital forensics, I need to get all that data collected. I need to get it put in one place so I can take a look at it and analyze it. And in forensics, we reconstruct events. We try to figure out what happened with the data. In eDiscovery, that's what we use data science for, right? So we're going to talk about that today because I think people don't necessarily think about eDiscovery when they think about data science. And a lot of people, when I say I've been in eDiscovery for 23 years, they're like, what is that? Not even realizing that there could be some career opportunities in it for them, a whole industry that they didn't know existed. So the next question I'm gonna ask you all is, why do we data? Before you answer that question, I'm gonna give you a little bit more information and give you time to think about the question. Why do we data? So first, why am I here? As I told you, I'm a data scientist, but I also am a technologist. I've been a technologist for 23 years. I help my clients process data and understand data so that they can get insights from the data. I also am a testifying expert. I speak to people about data like I'm doing right now. And I try to simplify things. I try to take things that are really, really complicated, like large data sets, and break them down into more manageable components. As you venture into the world of data science, that's going to be a lot of what you do. You're going to be like a really brilliant person in the room. Frequently, the most brilliant person in the room is who you're going to be. And you're going to be talking about stuff that other people don't necessarily understand. So another thing that I do is I translate. I take the sometimes really complicated language of data and explain it to people who don't understand it. In my world, those people are usually finders of fact, is what we call them in the eDiscovery world. Finders of fact are judges, jurors, some witnesses, sometimes other attorneys, right? People who are trying to understand what the underlying layers of facts are. Why do they need to know that? Because they're going to have to make decisions. A judge is going to have to make a decision. A juror is going to have to make a decision with their colleagues on the jury. And if the data is too complicated, it's going to be more difficult for them to make their decisions. So I got to translate and I have to teach them what data is and what data means. There's an opportunity for you to do that. The whole goal of all of this is to solve problems with data, and we're usually solving those problems for people. People are impacted by the data. People are the reason data exists. So I always try to keep a people-focused lens when I'm using it. I just did a presentation yesterday for the Association of Corporate Counsel called the Empathy Code. Empathy, taking a human approach to data and technology, because we got to remember, we are the reason why all of this stuff exists. So with all of that massive amount of hints I just gave you, I will ask you the question that I asked you before. Why do we data? What is the reason we data? Why does technology exist? For what purpose? Anybody want to take a stab?
I didn't think I was going to be mic'd up, but I think we data because we want to constantly improve our current technology. We want to always be looking ahead, and we're always trying to evolve. So I think we use data to help us in that process and see where we can improve and see what works and what doesn't. And we just use data as a resource to kind of get a greater lens on the problem that we're facing.
That is a great answer, and it is an accurate answer. There's some in the chat. I see people saying helps us to see patterns, get the right information at the right place at the right time. It aids our decision making. So the essence of why we data is us. It's people. We data for us so that we can understand data better, so that we can be more efficient, so that we can make better decisions, right? I would argue that everything, all the data we create is for people. All the technology we develop is for people. You may intuitively say, well, are there some things that we develop that aren't for people? But I would argue that, because take something like climate change, for example. We're trying to, improve biodiversity and protect species and keep the temperature of the planet from changing and all of that stuff, right? And you would say, well, so that technology, we're doing that stuff for the planet. But I would posit that if we were to fail and the atmosphere was to completely deteriorate, it would fail to sustain human life. And if our species didn't survive, the planet would continue to exist, and it would maybe even recover after we were gone. So everything we're developing is for us. But I think there's just an opportunity. There's an opportunity for us to use data to understand ourselves more. That is why I use data science, and that's why data science is such an important tool in eDiscovery, because people are who are involved in these matters. People are the ones who are communicating on social media, who are sending chats back and forth, sending emails. The data in databases is put there because people are using technological tools, and data is connected to people. It's connected to all of those systems, but those systems are connected to us, and it just gives us the ability to learn more about one another, okay? Any questions for me thus far? No. Okay. Remember, if you have questions, feel free to jump right in. So I asked you why we data. You answered the questions beautifully. The center of those answers was because of people. Here's one of the major reasons why we need data scientists in eDiscovery to be able to tell stories using data. I took this case a couple of years ago. This young lady, Miss Massillon, was a co-defendant in a matter. Now, someone did lose their life in this matter due to gun violence. And like I said, Ms. Massillon was a co-defendant, and I took this case pro bono. The reason why I took this case pro bono is because she never would have been able to afford my services otherwise. Data scientists can get paid very handsomely, even in the eDiscovery world. So that's something that to know as you move forward with your career choices. So they were co-defendants in a murder case, and Ms. Massillon, at the time, her attorneys who procured my services brought me in to work on the case pro bono. She had been incarcerated for 2 years, and she had been incarcerated for 2 years based on false statements by people who were at the scene, and partially because I think law enforcement just had a bit of a gap in the knowledge. They didn't do a great job of speaking the language of data, so they didn't really interpret what they were seeing in the data properly, and as a result, that combined with false statements from eyewitnesses, she ended up getting detained, and she was locked up for 2 years. So what did I do? Some people, because I'm tight, some people take a look at this and they see a mess, right? I take a look at this and I say, I have some questions. First of all, what is this? Does anybody know what this is? It's a map tracking someone's location. Oh, that's hilarious. So someone regrets that they're not going to be able to participate. So that means we have to increase our participation to account for their lack of participation. There's so many U's. So who knows what a geolocation is? What is a geolocation?
That's when your cell phone pings the local tower.
That person answered at the same time you were answering. So that's correct. Geolocation is a means of being able to identify the location of a device, right? And usually there are people using the devices.
Do you mind if I just cut in? So the only reason why we have to mic you all is because the folks in Zoom can't hear the answers. So either you feel free to repeat what they're saying, or I will mic you guys.
So
That's not fair.
When we answer in person, let's wait for the mic to come to you, and then everybody will be able to hear. And that's my fault. So it's my. That's right. Geolocation data is to help identify the location of a device. There's many ways to do that. You may hear the term GPS. GPS is just one way of using geolocation data. GPS uses satellites, but there are lots of data sources for geolocation data, not just GPS. All of them will give you longitude and latitude, but Bluetooth, will give you a geolocation. Wi-Fi devices. If you have a data center of somewhere nearby, the IP address will have a geolocation for the data center. So there's publicly facing IP addresses. There are privately facing IP addresses. They may have different geolocations. They may have the same geolocations. So the first thing I'm thinking when I look at this and I see all of these geolocations, which are from one device, is where are the sources? Where did they get the data from, right? I need to get some clarity on that to understand how much weight I can give to one coordinate versus another coordinate. So those were the locations for Ms. Massillon's device. And I went about the process of analyzing them and determining for each coordinate, what was the source? Did that geolocation coordinate come from a satellite? Did it come from Bluetooth? Did it come from Wi-Fi? Was it pinging off some other device? And then I determined what the precision of them was. The precision is going to be different for each data source, right? Why would that be helpful for me from a data science perspective? Any guesses? Nothing to chat yet. So if I have two geolocation coordinates with the exact same timestamp, but they have different sources and one has a tighter precision than the other, wouldn't one be more reliable to use in another? So if someone is making an assertion that someone was in one location based on one geolocation coordinate, and then another person is making a different assumption, I can look at both coordinates and say, hey, well, one of them came from a cell phone tower, and a cell phone tower may only be accurate up to 3,000 meters. But another one came from a Bluetooth device, and that might be accurate down to 3 meters. And I'm going to use that one, right?
And somebody in the chat said that we need probability. Whitting said we need probabilities.
Also true. Also true, because when you look at this, so a precision is determined by the source of the device. And the precision in this example is, you see this center point that's in the middle of the circle? That coordinate is saying the location is somewhere within a 10-meter radius around that circle. So the coordinate is not saying that's exactly where the person was. The coordinate is saying they're somewhere within that radius. Now, if that was a satellite or if that was a cell tower, that circle would be way bigger. And that might be helpful if you're trying to determine if somebody was on one side of the country or another side of the country, or if they were in one town versus another town. But if you're trying to pinpoint exactly what course somebody charted walking through a neighborhood, which is the case in this matter, that's very important. So what devices have the highest precision? A good rule of thumb is that the weaker the signal is for the device, the higher the precision is going to be, because it won't reach as far. Think about how much ground a cell phone tower can cover. So, I mean, it can cover thousands of meters. Think about how much ground a satellite can cover, right? And then think about things that could disrupt the signal, like cloud cover and stuff like that. So, but a Bluetooth device, it doesn't reach very far. It reaches feet in most cases. A Wi-Fi signal reaches a little further. So still pretty accurate, but much more accurate than a satellite or a cell tower.
So you had, sorry to cut in, one more from Whitting. The reasonable doubt arises about the location. So that's what you were getting to.
Exactly. So you guys are asking great questions, which scientists do very, very well. So part of my job as a data scientist was to educate the legal team on this. They didn't understand the difference in precision. They actually literally asked me, we have all of these date and time stamps, the same date and time stamp with different locations. How can that be? This is why, right? So I was able to use that to start charting a path for Ms. Massillon. So She was in a vehicle. Where did that vehicle go? At what times was that vehicle there, right? And then as we get into the neighborhood where the incident occurred, uh, the witnesses had a narrative about where she walked, she and her co-defendant, right? I'm scientifically agnostic. I don't know. I don't know what they said. I didn't read their statements. I just looked at the data I was provided, and then I asked the data, what story was it telling me? The data told me this is the most likely path that she walked. And these are the times that she walked that path. And I was able to narrow it down because there were a lot of locations saying she was in a lot of different places. But I only took the most precise locations from the data set, which I was able to filter out using data science techniques. And have you guys ever heard of lens flare? So I heard a couple of people have heard of lens flare. It's a very common phenomenon. Anybody want to take a shot at trying to explain what it is? Yeah.
My understanding of lens flare is that it's like if there's a light in front of a camera, it can like block out, like it can like obscure the image rather than just like illuminating the stuff that's around it. Like it could like make like a hole on the image almost.
That is very close. That's very close. And I think lens flare will do that. And lens flare is doing something very specific in this instance, though, that's very important. Anybody else want to take a shot? Okay. So in this instance, look at these examples where we see there's a street lamp and then there's a reflection of that street lamp. If you were here in real life, all of the reflections would not exist. You see where it looks like there's light reflected on the street? There would be no reflection on the street. It's only in the lens where that reflection is occurring, right? So it usually happens in high contrast situations, like the sun being in your frame or a really bright street lamp in a really dark setting. The issue in this case is that people were looking at the video, seeing the reflections, and assuming that someone was carrying a gun with a scope, and that was the light that was reflecting on the ground. But there was no light reflecting on the ground. Another good way to tell if lens flare is occurring is when you watch a video, which is what these stills are taken from, the position of the light will change relative to the reflection. And then when the light goes out of the frame, the reflection disappears. So it's another really good way of being able to test that theory. So in addition to the data science, I did some old school sleuthing, which you also get to do. And what was the result for Ms. Massillon? Well, I wrote an expert report with all my data science findings, and I submitted it, and counsel filed it, and I was preparing to go testify, and all of the witnesses recanted their statements before I got a chance to testify. And Ms. Massillon was found not guilty on all charges. She also had charges against her in an adjacent matter, and those charges were dropped as well. So we're talking about a person who was locked up for 2 years for something that she did not do because people were dishonest, but data told the truth. And as data scientists in eDiscovery, you have power to ask the data, what really happened? In many instances, data is going to be the best eyewitness. Data is going to give you the most accurate assessment of what happened in a situation. So that is what data can do for us. It can help us understand one another, as I started, but it can also help us understand situations. And in my job, that is primarily what we use data for, trying to understand situations. Do a time check. Okay, so people ask me, what is big data? When people used to ask me that 20 years ago, I would say that, oh, yeah, big data is like, if you ever see like a big civil litigation, big data is like when you scan all the documents and you take all of the emails and you digitize them, right? Because that's what you had to do. You had to take something that was analog and digitize it. Or you take you take a couple million records from a database, and that's big data. I would posit now that there is no such thing as big data. It's all just massive amounts of data. There's no more millions of records. There's trillions of records. There's petabytes of data. And we need eDiscovery to be able to manage it all. I was going to ask you all this question, but I clicked too quickly, so I'm going to leave it up there. So IBM did a study a couple years ago, so this is probably old by now, that 90% of all data has been created in the last 2 years. 90% of all data. That's an insane concept. But when you think about it, let's go back to this thing that we walk around with. Pictures are really like massive pieces of data, like one picture, one video. It's massive. We walk around with computers that have cameras on them. And it used to be, if you wanted to take a video, you took an analog camcorder. There was no data. It was an analog on a tape. And if you wanted to take a picture, you had a camera. And in order to convert that into data, you needed to scan it. Now you don't have to do that. Now everybody has a camera and everybody's just taking pictures all the time, and it's automatically digitized, and they're taking videos, and all these cameras have really high metapixel counts, and the amount of metadata associated with just pictures and videos is crazy, right? All the things, exposures and resolutions and pixel widths and heights and all of these things. But all of that stuff can help you make determinations about what camera was used to take the picture. Pictures hold geolocation data, so you can know where the device was when the picture was taken, right? All useful information, all helps me reconstruct events.
You have a question in the chat that says, where is all eDiscovery stored?
So I don't think all eDiscovery is stored anywhere, because eDiscovery is analysis of data that is specifically needed for cases. And we'll talk about that later. What that means is that all data is potentially eDiscovery data. It doesn't matter what it is. The question of will it become eDiscovery data is, will there be a case or a matter born from it? All your company's data is just company data until there's an internal investigation. And now all of a sudden, all that company data is eDiscovery data, because it may help you determine what happened in that situation. So a great question. It's stored everywhere because all data is potentially eDiscovery data. Somebody said, what's IBM? I'm not going to answer that because that's just going to make me feel old.
IBM Watson is a lawyer company. The app, which is free of any charges. You don't need to pay for any lawyers. That's a
Oof. Oof. So this is an interesting thought that somebody had. Not all information can be stored on one device, as the knowledge that's on the device would be stored in the device. A paradox. That's an interesting idea, especially when we're talking about phones, because as a data scientist, if you work in my field, one of the things you need to know is that all the data that you're interacting with on this device is not stored on this device. A lot of the data you're interacting with, you're just managing on the device. You're accessing it on the device. It's passing through the device, and it's stored somewhere else. It's stored in a cloud server. It's stored in a backup. We have to deal with email a lot in my industry, and people read a lot of emails on their devices. And in most instances, if you collect data from a phone, it's not going to be any email on the phone. You're only accessing the email on your phone, right? So I have to know, like, what data am I likely to get? So one of the things I tell my clients all the time is, you don't follow devices, you follow the data. You need to understand what's going to help you resolve a matter, and then think about alternative data sources to get to where you need to solve the matter. And sometimes that's not going to take you to a particular device. Sometimes it might not take you to a device at all. Sometimes it may take you straight to the cloud. Sometimes it may take you to somebody's security system that has bad swipes on it or something like that, right? Do you think it's a bad idea to put yourself out there? Social media, YouTube, blogs, is it better to keep a low profile on the internet? So I do not think it is my responsibility, or I think it would be irresponsible for me to say better or not better. I think my responsibility is to say, know what you're doing. Just be aware. Understand that when you put something on social media, you are making that potentially available to everybody in the world. So understand how the systems work. Do the best you can do to protect your data. Just about every system that holds data nowadays has multi-factor authentication options. And you can make sure that people have to use 2, sometimes 3 methods of verification before they can get access to your data, right? That's one way. But if your account is public and you post something, everybody can see what you posted. So my personal choice is I use all of these things. I use them all as a data scientist. I do not have fear of having my information in the public sphere. I just make sure I am convicted and I stand by whatever I put out in the sphere, especially because I'm a testifying expert, which means anything I say could potentially be used against me in court. So I just make sure I stand by anything I put out there. So if I gave you a recommendation, it would just be know how the systems work, know where the data is stored, know how to protect your information as best you can, and then you make a decision about whether or not it's better or worse to use those systems.
We have 2 questions in the chat or comments. So from Walter, is some data privileged regardless of where it's stored? And actually, I would like to follow up with that question, because my question was very similar to Walter's, is that maybe it's coming later, but how do you get access to a lot of the proprietary data that you're working with? We'll stop there.
Okay.
That's too big.
So the short answer to the first question is privilege is a legal determination. So I can't actually tell you what's privileged. Your attorney can advise you about what's privileged, but the basic concept of privilege, based on me working with attorneys for 23 years, is that you have certain interactions and certain communications that are protected by the law that you do not have to disclose, because an attorney is allowed to have interactions and communications with you, either to further your defense or aid you in your complaint against somebody else. So privilege is really determined like by your circumstance, and your attorney is the best person to make that determination about what's privileged. And it's not set in stone, because your attorney can make an assertion that something is privileged, and the court or opposing counsel can say, no, it's not privileged. And then you have to argue about it. So something that you assume is privileged could end up not being privileged. So it's still data, but your attorney knows better whether or not it's privileged. And then your follow-up question was, okay, so that's a good question, because we're not going to cover that specifically. We were more going to cover like the fact that there are different ways to get access to it, but I'm going to answer that. So there are a lot of tools on the market available to be able to collect data, but you don't need tools for all of it. So pretty much every social media platform, pretty much every collaborative platform like SharePoint and Teams and Slack and all of those guys, those platforms have built-in functionality for you to be able to just download the data. You can literally just go to the website, and through a series of clicks, find the setting that says request my data or download my data or export my data, and they'll give you options. Sometimes it'll download it in like HTML format, which is fine if you want to kind of look at it like you're looking at a regular website. But it may give it to you in JSON format. And if you do any work in data science, you know that format is, what's the term I used earlier, Dr. Sadie? It's, format agnostic. So JSON can be formatted pretty much up to the imagination of whoever's formatting it, right? But that's what you would want if you were downloading it using that method, because you can take those JSON files and then massage that data to be able to get it into a system for later analysis. But they do make tools. The issue with the tools is that all the tools are reverse engineered. Apple, Microsoft, Samsung, Android, none of them are saying, hey, all of you digital forensics experts and data scientists, here, have access to my operating system and take all the artifacts out that you want. They're doing the opposite. They're trying to keep us out of the systems. They don't want their data anyplace else but in their systems. So a lot of the third-party tools, they reverse engineer them so that we can get into them and extract the data out that we need. If you've ever heard of Celebrite or Oxygen, these are tools that you use to collect mobile device data, and they reverse engineer. You have to put credentials in just like you're logging into the device, and then it pulls databases and parses them out. Same thing with, if you've ever heard of Encase or X-Ways is another one. Just lots of tools. So I wasn't gonna get that specific. So that's a really good question. You can benefit a lot if you go into eDiscovery just knowing what those tools are. And becoming a specialist in using those particular tools. And maybe even go to work for some of the tool developers. That's something that I don't even really talk about that often. As a data scientist in eDiscovery, you could actually work on the tool development side of eDiscovery and program the tools that people in my field use when we do investigations. So there's really no limit to what you can do in eDiscovery with data science knowledge. All right. I think the questions are so good, I'm gonna skip some stuff. All right. So one of the reasons I want you to see this is because in data science, these are principles that are very common, right? In data science, you still have to collect the data, you have to process it, and you have to manage it so that it can be presented as a visualization to somebody else, right? That is very similar to what we call the EDRM. It's the eDiscovery reference model. And you have to do the same things. You have to collect data, you have to have it set up for review, you have to produce it to other sides, and presentation, visualization, same thing, right? So a lot of the skill sets in data science, we're leveraging the exact same skill sets in eDiscovery. So you're kind of, minus the law part, if you are studying data science, in some ways you are learning how to work in eDiscovery already. Some of the skill sets are already there for you. Given all the personal data and hacks and data breaches when doing eDiscovery, is it worth it to look for relevant data in leaked data? Yes. Have you ever heard the term open source intelligence? Has anybody ever heard that term? You've heard that term? Okay. So open source intelligence just means on the open public internet and even on the dark web, there's information available that you can get it if you scrape, right? So they make tools for you to be able to just kind of go out on the internet and see if you can scrape anything that's associated with a particular person. But yeah, if somebody leaks data, that's a good way to find leaked data, is by open source intelligence. And we have some protocol for being able to do that. I think that's a statement, not a question. So. Did prosecutors really get on your case in a court matter? No, but that's only because I ended up not testifying live. If I testified live, they would have tried to tear me apart. They would have tried to rip my credibility. I mean, the data is the data. And frequently what happens to me, if you're going to be a testifying expert, you do sometimes have to have thick skin, because when the data says what it says and they can't puncture any holes in your data, they'll dig into like your personal life to see if there's something that you did that's not, that they can flip to say that's not credible. I'm married for the second time, so I'm divorced. Somebody tried to use that against me on the stand one time, and even the judge was just incredulous about that. So yeah, they will attack you. The opposing side will attack you however they can. But being a testifying expert is a choice. You don't have to do that in data science. I like teaching so much that I even like getting on the stand to teach judges and teach jurors, and mainly because I think it's just necessary. It's our justice system, and decisions about people's lives are being made, and these people who are making those decisions, they need to be as informed as possible when they make those decisions. So for me, it's a responsibility to do that. So why does all of this matter? From a practical sense, just like I described in this case, I don't think nowadays there's any case in the world that's not going to be impacted by data. The only thing that's really going to be impacted is, do you pay attention to the data or do you ignore the data? But you should always be thinking about, is there a data source that's going to help me resolve this matter? And as a data scientist, you get to be a champion of that. You get to be a champion of data and using it to help resolve disputes. If you end up working in eDiscovery, you know, your counsel may not be wanting to look at data. They may be concerned about costs. They may think that, they may assume that the data sources are not relevant, but on the other side, they may not be ignoring it. So you get to tell counsel, hey, this is the data that's available that might help you, and your opponents might be using it. And so you'll be at a disadvantage if you don't use data. You get to tell them, because you understand how all of this stuff works. You understand that 80% of the work in data science is data management before you even get to the analysis and get to finding conclusions and stuff. So you get to tell them, yeah, just collecting data and then getting an insight, that's not an overnight thing. So it's going to impact your deadlines if we need to do this. They need to be forming relationships with people like you to help them understand and interpret the data, and you're going to have to charge them at some point. So paying attention to data in your in a trial or in a matter, that's going to have an impact on the bottom line of their cases, and you'll be able to educate them on that. Because if they ignore it, not only will they be disadvantaged, but cases can become very expensive. I'll have offline conversations for anyone who wants to talk about what my bill rates are. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this meme in many different instances, but it's very accurate when it comes to data. And when you think about devices, I think in 2022, there were 14 billion connected devices worldwide. And in 2023, there were over 15 billion connected devices worldwide. So I don't even know what it is for 2024, but obviously it's more at this point. And that's just the devices. But as we were just talking about, one device can hold a world of information from all different types of data sources. So if there's more than 15 billion connected devices, I mean, there are petabytes on petabytes on petabytes of data associated with those devices. I can't see a world where you can manage any of that without the skill sets in data science. So I need people on my team who can program in R and Python, who can use Tableau, because right now nobody on my team can use Tableau. So I can use it. Anybody knows Tableau and they want to work in eDiscovery, give me a shout. But yeah, just a lot of data to get through. Do you see AI taking roles from data scientists in eDiscovery in the future? Was going to talk about that later, but let's talk about it now. I don't think AI is going to take jobs away from data scientists. I think, like I was describing, there is a part of data science that is heavily involved in just managing data, just wrangling it, just massaging it, getting data from its native format into the format, right? Like once it's aggregated, you can analyze it and start learning from it, right? I think AI is going to help us with that part. It's going to make that 80% part way more efficient. So AI is only ever going to be able to I don't know that AI is going to ever be able to give us insights from data. I think that's always going to be people. I think AI is going to be really good at identifying, okay, I've taken all of these different formats and I've made some adjustments so the formats are the same. And I've assisted with the aggregation to get this data from this place into this place. These are some patterns that I think I recognize, but I don't know what it means, right? I think you're always going to need people for that part. Even if AI helps you identify the patterns or highlight an anomaly, it's not going to be able to translate any sort of significance to it, right? And I could be totally wrong about that, right? I mean, I used to use a rotary phone. You know what I'm saying? So now I use a powerful computer every day in my pocket. So I didn't know that was going to happen. So maybe AI will get intelligent enough where it can actually suggest insights to you, right? I think what we need to do as people who develop artificial intelligence tools and utilize those tools and empower AI to be able to execute tasks on our behalf, we just need to make sure that we always remain the decision makers. We need to make sure, because the main problem is AI is a black box and we can't always know with 100% certainty how an AI arrived at that final destination. That's kind of a new thing for the tools we've developed. In most ways, I say AI is not really different from any other tool. It's something you have to learn, something you have to get used to, something that people have to leverage in order to be effective. But the one thing I will say is different is that most tools that we create, we understand the entire process. And with AI, we don't completely understand, even if it generates known outcomes, we don't understand every iteration in the neural network that caused it to arrive at that final destination. So I probably shouldn't use the phrase final destination. Anybody remember that movie series? Final Destination and AI is probably a scary combination. But yeah, so I don't think AI is going to take jobs from data scientists. I think at least not in the near future anyway. I think AI is going to make data scientists way more efficient than they ever dreamed they could be. And AI is going to empower data scientists to be able to get to insights faster. One of the things I tell my clients, I'm trying to decrease your time to insight. And I think AI is going to help with that. They got my corny joke. All right, so yeah, we got 10 minutes left? Okay, yeah. Skip. Okay, so when you're communicating with people in eDiscovery, there's a couple of things that you should get used to teaching them what they mean, because they're not going to know off the top of their head. I use the term aggregate many times today. And so when you're talking to attorneys and paralegals and legal assistants, they are really, really brilliant people who may not understand what aggregate means, especially in the data science sense. So I just simplified the explanation for them so you can use this. Aggregation is taking a bunch of things from a bunch of different places and putting it all in the same place. Simple concept. So if you're trying to explain aggregation to somebody, that's it. So if I gotta collect information from a Windows laptop, I gotta get geolocation from an Android device, I gotta get social media data from Facebook and Instagram, I got to use different tools to collect them all. And then I gotta make sure that I can assess the data, which also takes different tools. A lot of tools you collect with aren't the same tools to assess the data. I gotta parse out the artifacts, which sometimes take different tools. I have to get stuff that's not similarly formatted into the same format, and then I gotta consolidate it all in one place. And then once it's all in one place, I can do the analysis and do the visualizations. By the way, like I described before, this stuff, the stuff before, that's the 80%. This is the 20%. This is the 20% of the work right here. And as of right now, I think AI is only going to help you do this stuff. I don't think AI is going to be able to do this stuff for you. You think about how generative AI works, right? It works off of prompts. And because it's using LLMs, it's only as good as the underlying information that was used to train the model and the prompt that you use to get it to generate the new content, right? So people are so integral to that process. The AI is going to either give you garbage if your prompts are bad or the underlying information is bad, or it's going to give you hallucinations. It's going to make something up, right? Because AI is really eager to please. That's the good thing about AI. If you ask AI for something, it's going to give it to you. Even if it doesn't exist, it'll just make it up and give you what you want, right? So we're so important to the process, and we can't forget that. Also, categorize is something that's really important to remember, because that's what makes what we do possible. Every piece of data in existence falls into one or more of these 5 categories. It is either an entity, it's a place, it's a thing, it's a time, or it's something that happened, an event. Every piece of data in existence falls into one of these categories. So if it does, then that means every piece of data in existence can be categorized. And if it can be categorized, we can manage it. We can write code to ingest it. We can write code to adapt it and format it, right? So that's another good term for you to figure out easy ways to teach your clients and people who you will be working with later. So let me see. Oof. I love the questions, though. It's so much more important to take the questions than to just be spouting. Okay, let's jump to this one. So this is a good thing. Again, we're talking about the commonalities between eDiscovery and data science. And if you look at this, you'll see that they're like largely the same. Like so I used to think the differences were that eDiscovery is primarily used to reconstruct events. So you're trying to figure out what happened. And data science is primarily used to like prescribe something or predict something. But I think they both do both. I think in eDiscovery, you're trying to reconstruct events, but you're also trying to say this data suggests you should do this. You should judge, make this decision. Jury, you should draw this conclusion and then make a certain decision based on that. So I think we're really getting to a place where there's really no difference. Like eDiscovery and data science are linked so tight. There's one difference. I think in data science, people also trying to figure out how to make you buy stuff. And you don't do that in eDiscovery. That's the I say if there's still a difference, that's the one major difference. All right, we're not trying to, by me working on a case for an attorney, that's not going to make their IG feed start having all these different ads for eDiscovery services, or like it's not going to change their reels or anything like that. So yeah, I say if there's a difference, that's the difference. How do you compare, contrast computer science modeling and data science? In 4 minutes, I can't answer that. But I will also say, I'm going to get to a last slide that's going to have a LinkedIn QR code on it that I showed earlier. You can connect with me, any questions you have. I'm happy to answer questions. I actively mentor. It's something that I love doing. So if there's anything you want to learn more about, please reach out to me. We already talked about AI. What's this? All right, so in eDiscovery, we're trying to resolve disputes. Disputes are between people. So just remember that very important point. The data is created by people, for people. Having a command of the data and using it to help us understand the stories of what happened will help us resolve disputes between people. This is a really good, taken from another case that I did. All right, I'm gonna try to do this quick. Okay, all right. If everybody's okay, I'm gonna talk about this real quick. Okay, awesome. So this was a labor and employment case that we worked on. Name has been changed. We're going to call him Henry. Henry decided that he was getting overworked and underpaid and started complaining about it, right? So Henry kept logs, manual logs of his driving routes to all the locations he did to do pickups and drop-offs. And according to his logs, he went to these locations. But I asked the data, where did Henry really go? Because data from the GPS that was in his vehicle told me a lot about where he actually went. So yeah, he started from location 7, but he actually went to this location that wasn't on his log before he went to his next drop off. And then he did go from 1 to 2, but instead of going from 2 to 3, he went to another location that was not on his log, right? And then he went to 3, like he said, but instead of 4, he went back to that location. Something real special about that location, right? Because he went there again, then again to the place that was on his log, somewhere else that's not on his log. And before he went back to the final location where he started, he went back to that same location. I do not know what is there. I never looked up a map to see like what was there. I have my suspicions about what he might have been doing there, but so he said he was overworked and underpaid, but as we see, he was actually in this one, based on his logs, he did about 6 hours of work, but based on GPS, he did about 4 hours of work and actually didn't work during the course of the day for almost 6 hours. So if you don't learn anything else from this, understand that data science can tell you the truth about what something happened. And if you're getting away with doing a little bit of work, don't say anything. Just do your little bit of work and enjoy your life. Don't try to fleece somebody. You got a question? Hold for the microphone. Or I can repeat it, yeah. Not now. Yeah, so the question was, do we use Microsoft Access very often? Individuals use Microsoft Access, but at enterprise level, we don't really use it. For database applications, I think we use SQL for pretty much everything, but then we also script stuff to go into bases using databases using R and Python and stuff like that. But that's it. So learn the story, tell the story. That's what data can help us do. There was a bunch of recap stuff. We don't have to recap it because we can get to this one, and then you can just reach out to me if you need to with questions. But thank you all for the time. This is one of my favorite things to do, so I appreciate you all taking the time to be here and receive the information. Your questions really help. It ended up being a much different presentation than I even planned for it to be, and I appreciate that. And thank you, Dr. Sadie, for bringing me back. I love this, so I appreciate it.
Well, first of all, can we thank Mr. Williams for this wonderful presentation? It's incredible, incredible.
Thank you. Thank you.
Feel free to take a picture of the QR code if you want contact information. And we are going to end the Zoom recording, but I think you mentioned that for people here, you were going to hang around if anyone would like to have a word with Mr. Williams. So thank you if you're in Zoom. Thank you very much for attending and have a wonderful Friday. Hope you get some dry moments.